Once I reach 1,000 subscribers, I will always have a live chat on the first Friday of the month at 8 p.m. So please subscribe, click on the bell, and let's get 1,000 subscribers very soon. Gudde Moien and welcome back to Planet Althistory. Today we are going to discuss what if the Romans conquered Germania. The Roman Empire, we all know about the Roman Empire, and I don't think that I need to explain who they were, right? Anyways, the Romans had one episode in northern Central Europe. I call it an episode because they stayed there for a few years and didn't really pacify that region. I am talking, of course, about Germania. Germania roughly starts from the areas around Rhine-Mosel and the northern Alps, and it will end around the Elbe river. Germania was of course not always developed as Gaul, for instance, and only with the Romans some parts, because the Romans actually kept some parts that are nowadays Germanized, they truly evolved and saw a development. However, one should not forget that there was trade, there was a population, there were resources, but different types of resources, and the rivers Danube, Rhine, Mosel, Elbe, Oder, etc. And those are not very small rivers, so you can make a lot of trade, and even, come on, the Vikings, they could navigate through it, so they were pretty big rivers. Forests had a lot of animals. The trees can be used for boats, houses, for instance. That's Germania for you. Anyways, let's come back to the question. So what if the Romans conquered Germania? There are some ways how we could get this scenario done. But let's start with the most obvious way. Arminius is either not trusted by Varus, who would be convinced by various Germanic chiefdoms that were loyal to him, or Arminius would just not be born. The effect would be that the Germanics would not be organized, and since they were mostly unorganized and undisciplined, the Romans could continue their conquest of Germania. To be honest, it would not really be a conquest, but more like an occupation, I would say. Germania didn't have huge settlements, and the second most annoying part after the defeat in Teutoburg, of course, were only the forests. Forests were terrain which the Romans were not really used to have, especially such vast and never-ending forests. Without the Battle of Teutoburg, attrition would equally be responsible for the death of Roman soldiers as would be smaller battles that would be fought between the Romans and the Germanics. I won't say that it would be a cakewalk, but it seemed that Germania just didn't really resist the Romans except for Teutoburg, or that the Germanics perhaps didn't mind so much at first. The Romans would found newer cities on the Rhine River and later on other rivers as well. The Elbe would become the new border for Rome. The Romans in OTL wanted to get until the Elbe because it was a wide and a deep river. Plus, extending the border from there to the Alps would have created a considerably shorter border than they had to defend in that particular region in OTL. A shorter border would have meant fewer legions are required to guard it. Gaul was an important province for Rome and brought considerable gains. Having the Elbe River as border would also mean that Gaul will be having less problems with occasional attacks, and thus the economy, at least for Gaul and close provinces around, would be more stable and they could develop within the realm of Pax Romana. After pacifying Germania, the Romans would not just immediately go for the order, no. And it will also mean that the Germanic invasions will be very different. The Franks and the Saxons won't exist, as will be also many other Germanic tribes, they will just not exist. And there will be different peoples instead of them. Augustus, for instance, was well aware that the Roman Empire was too overstretched, and so were other rulers of Rome, thus conquering parts until the order would be out of question for the moment. The next logical step would be to Romanize this new area. Yes, Germania was undeveloped and lightly populated, but let's take a look in history. Julius Caesar cut the number of welfare recipients in Rome from about, I think, 500,000 to 90,000 from his public works and also his colonization programs. Carthage was rebuilt and resettled as part of this effort. Welfare recipients' numbers rose again over the next century, but with a larger Germania province badly needing tax-paying farmers and city dwellers, again welfare recipients would make ideal colonists, and Germania begins to generate modest tax revenues. The rivers that exist in Germania would be ideal for trade purposes and would open up an interesting economical perspective for Germania. Sure, forests and swamps were all over Germania, but these lands were just waiting to be cultivated. With the development of new cities, the colonization of Germania, these colonies would have relieved the urban poor and landless farmers, thus preventing social tensions while producing wealth and growth of ethnic Italic populations, and as a result more legions. An economy around trade, wheat, barley, oats, cattle herding, but also wood exportation, which was difficult to get at that time, and also leather would arise in Germania. Another very important aspect is amber, and I might dare to say that conquering all of Germania would result into a change of the amber trade routes. The amber route went from the Baltics, from around Riga or Gdansk, all the way down to Pannonia, modern-day Hungary. With the conquest of Germania, I think that the main route would at least be split. There would be one route which would supply the eastern part of the empire, and also one that would supply more the western parts, such as Germania, Gaul, Iberia, etc. It is also possible that amulets would become an important part of the economy in Germania, and perhaps Germania would become known as the province of the amber jewelers. One should not underestimate this aspect, because amber had a high price and only the wealthy Romans they could really afford it. A small single piece of amber was worth more than a healthy slave. And amber also helped, according to the Romans of course, to fight off certain diseases. Roman women, they played with amber, holding it in their hands and stroking it. This frequent contact with amber was most likely assumed to guarantee a youthful look. Famous for her beauty, Empress Poppaea, the wife of Nero, made amber so popular that women dyed their hair to match its color. So, if in OTL amber had such an effect, imagine the Romans having conquered Germania, and Germania being so close to the main sources of amber, it would probably have a really important effect, at least for that trade route. The Romans would get large amounts of auxiliary manpower from conquering Germania. Warrior culture was important for the Germanics. Just like in Gaul, the Romans most likely would have gotten large amounts of auxiliary troops. They in return would get loyal, and a warrior caste inside the Roman Empire might emerge. The best warriors could join the Roman elite, and also the wealthy Germanics would readily Romanize, just like the Celtic tribes did, or just like the Treveri people, for instance, in Luxembourg. The next thing we have with Germania is that probably there would be a sort of chain reaction. Probably Britain would not be conquered, or perhaps just much later, which would again help the Romans considerably in the future defense or future offensives that they would make around neighboring countries. The next step would be rather to push to Central Europe and also to have a frontier that is kind of like from the Elbe to the Alps to the Carpathians. Fewer legions again would be needed to guard the Elbe. No, Britain would yet again give more troops. Germania as well, because, well, they would be a very populated province, and thus you have a very defendable eastern border requiring far fewer legions than in OTL, and you also have more manpower available. More manpower means probably at a certain point that there will be some type of war. I mean, even if they conquer Germania and they have this very good border, the Romans will not just sit there and play with their thumbs. They will probably want to conquer something. Yes, the Germanic invasions might happen somehow. Yes, the invasions of the Huns as well, but never to such an extent where it might truly hurt the Romans, I think. I think that it is more likely that the Romans would retake the old plan of Caesar and try to reconquer Persia or Parthia or the Sassanids, because nobody rivals them in Africa. Europe is pretty much good defended, and the only rival that they would have was Parthia or the Sassanids or Persia, whatever you want to call them. And if they do this, it will be, of course, a very interesting province, because it was, in all those years, in all of antiquity, it was a very, very developed province with a lot of culture, a high economy. So there would be also this type of interest to actually conquer Persia. Another thing is that with Persia, the Romans, they would be open, especially in the north, but some parts, especially the highlands, could be interesting from a defensive point of view. Rome would still split, but the split would result not into a split as we know of Western and Eastern Rome, but I think it might become more some type of an effective diarchy and not a permanent split. Rome would anyways have some internal fights and whatnot, but I don't really find a way how Rome could be destroyed from an outside force. Islam will be butterflied away, or if it appears, it will be a regional power at a maximum. Rome would be able to keep the Arabs in check, Germanic tribes, many are already Romans, while others can't pass the borders. The Slavs, same story as the Germanic tribes. The Mongols could deal a huge blow in the eastern part of the empire, but I think that Anatolia, Levant and Egypt would stay safe. Crimea would, yes, it would get lost. And the future provinces in the east, between maybe the Elbe and Oder or even the Vistula, they would probably get rampaged. But then again, the Mongols, they would be so overstretched that they would not really be able to enter even more until, I would say, Germania. The only ones who could really have a huge impact, at least for the coast, they would be the Vikings. But the Vikings, even though they would pose a challenge to the Romans, they were not so numerous that they could just destroy this whole empire. They might probably settle in some parts, or they might cause some chain reactions, or actually make that people would leave the coast or some river cities, but it would not be to such an extent that the Roman Empire would just start to fall apart. Britain and Ireland might actually become part of this new alternate Scandinavia, Germanics would not really exist in this timeline, Christianity would be somewhat united, and Rome as well. So this is actually a very good timeline for Rome. It might not be a timeline of what if Rome never fell, because I already made such a timeline. So in here I specifically try to specify why Germania would be, for instance, very important to conquer, what type of economy it would have, and as for now I will stop the video in here. Thanks for watching. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed my video. Be sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, support me also on Patreon, and join my forum, forum.planetalthistory.ga. Until next time on Planet Althistory.